July 29th, 1910. Before the sun is fully up over the pine trees of East Texas, a black farmer steps out onto his porch and takes a deep breath of morning air. He feels the damp wood under his bare feet. He smells coffee drifting from the little kitchen behind him. He hears chickens scratching in the dirt and a cow lowing in the distance. This is his land, his soil, his sweat in every fence post and furrow. It is Slocum in Anderson County, Texas, not far from the town of Palestine, and for a few more minutes, it is still quiet. He looks out over about 80 acres of cotton and corn-rich dark earth that his family has worked for years. He is not a sharecropper. He is not a tenant. He owns this land outright in a state and in a year where that alone makes him a problem. Where a black man with a deed in his hand is more dangerous to the system than any weapon. This morning he stands with a Bible on the table behind him, a hoe leaning against the porch rail, and a head full of plans for harvest repairs, maybe adding a room to the house this winter. He has no idea that by the end of the week, people will be walking through these same fields, not to work them, but to look for his body, listen to the sounds with him. Birds waking up in the trees, the creak of the porch boards, his wife moving around the stove inside humming a hymn her grandmother sang under slavery, children still asleep on pallets on the floor, their feet dusty from yesterday's play. It is an ordinary black farming morning in 1910, in a community where black ownership is not the exception, it is the rule. In this little pocket of East Texas, black families have bought land, built houses, opened small stores, and carved out something rare. A majority black rural community where people are considerably propertied, as one white observer begrudgingly admitted years later. Their names are on deeds. Their crops are in the ground. Their wealth is growing in rows of cotton and corn. Now hear something new break into that peace. At first it is just a faint rhythm, hoofbeats on dry dirt roads, a low rumble far off through the trees. The farmer squints toward the tree line. A thin line of dust rises above the pines. The sound gets sharper. Horses, more than a few. Men talking in the distance. The easy noises of morning begin to feel thin, like they could tear at any second. A second later, they do. The first shot cracks the air like a whip. It does not sound like warning. It sounds like decision. Then another. Then shouting. The farmer's wife freezes at the stove, then drops the ladle and runs for the children. He feels his heart slam into his ribs. Those hoofbeats he heard are close now, men yelling over each other. He hears words he has heard his whole life. Get them. Run them out. Take their land. He does not have time to debate what it means. He knows. He grabs his son, 8 years old, still half asleep, and terrified, and pulls him out the back door. His daughter stumbles after them with bare feet in the dirt. Behind them, the screen door bangs open and shut. In front of them, the pine woods open like a dark mouth. He hears another shot closer. The side of the house splinters. Glass shatters. The Bible on the table flips open from the shock. He turns once for a last look. Flames are already licking at the side of the house. Either someone threw kerosene or dry boards caught from a bullet. Smoke curls up into the July sky. Through it he can see white men on horseback, hats pulled low, rifles in hand. Faces twisted not like men forced into something, but like men who came to do exactly this. Some he recognizes, men from town, men from the road crew, men who know exactly whose land this is. He runs anyway. Branches slap his face. His son is sobbing. His daughter trips and scrambles back up. Behind them, more shots. He hears bodies hit the ground somewhere to his left. Another black man, another neighbor, another landowner, who woke up thinking about crops instead of survival. By the time the sun sets on that day, white hunting parties will roam these woods, shooting down black men as fast as they can find them, as one Texas sheriff later admitted. Bodies will be scattered through fields and thickets. Some will be found by buzzards before any officer even thinks to ask a question. For 2 days along the back roads and homesteads of Slocum and nearby communities, armed white men will ride and walk in groups of 10, 20, even 100, looking for one thing: black bodies. And they will not stop because someone fights them off. They will stop because there are not enough black people left to kill. Because those who can run will have fled this land in the night, leaving behind homes, crops, furniture, livestock, tools, and deeds. Leaving behind wealth that will quietly transfer into other hands over the next months and years. What happens in those 48 hours will not be called a massacre in the history books for a century. It will barely be called anything at all. Local histories will skip over it. School teachers will never mention it. The land will keep growing cotton. White families will build houses on the soil where black bodies fell. Children will play in yards that once belonged to people their grandparents helped drive out. No one will put this in their official stories. You need to understand something right at the start. Slocum was not a riot. It was not a clash. It was not some mutual war between equal sides. It was a coordinated hunt. A hunt that eyewitnesses compared to running down sheep. It was a purge of a successful black farming community, carried out with guns, fear, and the promise of land on the other side. And for over 100 years, almost nobody told you about it. So ask yourself this: how does a black man own 80 acres on Friday and end up dead in a ditch by Sunday with his land in someone else's name by the next tax season? How does a community go from majority black and prosperous to mostly white and silent about what happened? How does that kind of violence vanish from the official story? By the time you finish this video, you will not only know what happened in Slocum in 1910, you will understand why it was buried. You will see how it connects to the land your grandparents lost, the wealth your family never inherited, the neighborhoods where your children grew up renting instead of owning. You will see how those shots in the pine woods still echo in the wealth gap in the fight over reparations in every black farmer struggling to hang on to a few acres today. This is not entertainment. This is your history. This is your money. This is your bloodline. By the end of this journey together, you will know 3 things in a way nobody can ever take from you again. First, you will know the real story of black farmers in Texas who were not helpless victims, but landowners, business people, and community builders whose success drew violence. Second, you will know the pattern, because Slocum was not some tragic one. Off it fit into a larger system that destroyed black wealth whenever it appeared. Third, you will know exactly how that destruction shows up in your life, right now, in your finances, in your housing, in your community, and why the conversation about reparations is not about guilt, but about debt. After this video, you will never look at black poverty the same way again. You will not say they failed. You will know they were robbed. You will not say your grandmother just did not work hard enough. You will know what was taken from her before she was even born. And here is the part that matters most. This is not just about outrage. It is about identity and power. You are not the child of failure. You are the descendant of people who built wealth and held land under terror. They were targeted because they were succeeding. Once you see that clearly, you cannot unsee it. And once you see it, you start to ask a different kind of question. Not what is wrong with us, but what was done to us, and how do we reclaim what was stolen. We are going to walk through Slocum. Then we are going to step back and see the same pattern in Wilmington, in Rosewood, in Elaine, in Ocoee, in Tulsa, and in hundreds of smaller places whose names never made the news. We will look at court documents, official statements, census numbers, land records where we can. We will connect those dots all the way up to current fights over black land loss, USDA discrimination, heirs property scams, and the modern wealth gap. This might make you angry. It should. It might make you grieve. That is holy. But if you stay with this to the end, you will also feel something else. Pride, clarity, a sense that God did not let your people survive all this for you to live in confusion about who you are and what you deserve. And before we go any further, hear this clearly. This is not about hating anyone. This is not black against white. This is truth against lies, justice against systems of theft. If you are someone who loves truth, this is for you no matter what you look like. If you have ever felt that what you learned in school did not quite add up, that something was missing when they talked about how America got rich and who paid the price, then you are exactly where you are supposed to be right now. So let us go back to Slocum before the shots, so you can see exactly what kind of community had to be destroyed and why. Slocum, Texas sits in Anderson County in the piney woods of East Texas, not far from the Trinity River and a short ride from the town of Palestine. In 1910, it is not a city. There is no incorporated government, no big courthouse square, no railroad depot with fancy architecture. It is a rural cluster of farms, dirt roads, a few small stores, a church or two, and fields stretching out under the heavy summer sun. But for black people in that region, Slocum is something rare. It is a place where black land ownership is thick on the ground. Imagine census pages in 1910, handwritten lines, listing black heads of household in Slocum and nearby communities. Next to their names, not the usual word tenant, not sharecropper, but owner. Imagine a map with parcels shaded in to show who holds what. In that patch of East Texas, it would surprise many to see how many of those shaded blocks belong to black families. Some own 40 acres, some 60, some 80 or more. That is not imagined pride. That is recorded reality in the accounts that eventually came out about Slocum and the families who lived there, described as substantially propertied for black farmers in that era. The men and women of Slocum are not statistics. They have names, families, and routines. There is a farmer who has worked his 80 acres long enough to pay off every note proud that no one can put a lien on his soil. There is a storekeeper who runs a little general store selling sugar flour nails, lamp oil, and cloth to neighbors who pay in cash or crop. There is a man known for his fine team of mules who hires out to haul logs or cotton. There are women who run boarding houses and take in laundry stacking coins every week toward buying another small parcel next to the family plot. Children in Slocum wake up before dawn to feed chickens, milk cows, and draw water, then walk dusty roads to small schoolhouses when the season allows. They learn their letters, read scripture, study arithmetic, and then hurry back to help in the fields. On Sundays, families dress in their best and pack into wooden churches under tin roofs. Deacons pray, loud choir members lead songs their grandparents learned under the eye of overseers, and preachers talk about Pharaoh and deliverance, about promised land, and a God who sees blood in the dirt when men pretend they do not. Economically, Slocum sits in a moment that almost no one talks about when they mention black history. Everyone knows about slavery. Fewer talk about what came after, when newly freed people grabbed hold of land any way they could. By 1910, across the South, black farmers own around 16 million acres of land and run hundreds of thousands of farms. In some counties, their numbers and productivity rival or surpass white farmers. It is the high watermark of independent black agriculture in the United States. It is also the moment when the backlash grows teeth. In East Texas, terror is already in the air before a single shot sounds in Slocum. Less than half a year earlier, in March of 1910, a black man named Allen Brooks is dragged from a courtroom in Dallas, accused of assault, and hanged from a telephone pole in front of a cheering crowd. Photographers capture his lifeless body. Those images are printed as postcards. White families mail them to each other, like souvenirs. That is the spiritual climate when black landowners in Slocum wake up each day. They know what can happen if they are seen as too successful, too confident, too unwilling to bow their heads. Still they farm. They build. They send money to help relatives in other states. They pay tithes. They extend credit to neighbors in hard seasons. They plan to pass this land to their children. They teach those children that owning land is protection. That land is freedom. That land is the one thing no one can take away if your name is on the paper and you keep up the taxes. That last belief will be proven wrong. So how do you get from a community of land-holding black farmers to a 2-day massacre that leaves bodies in the woods and deeds in other hands? It does not start with a gunshot. It starts with a feeling, resentment. In the weeks before the killings, white men in the area begin to talk. Some are already uneasy, seeing black families riding in their own wagons, driving their own teams, taking their cotton to market themselves, instead of working someone else's rows. They hear about road work in the county and public funds being spent. They expect every line of authority to belong to them. So when a black man is given authority over road work in the district with power to hire local labor, something in them snaps. Picture a white citizen used to seeing black men step off the sidewalk when he approaches being told to take orders from a black road boss about where to work and when. He will not stand for it. He complains to others. He uses that ugly phrase that always shows up in these stories, that the colored people are getting too high. He goes from house to house store to store stoking anger. He does not need facts. He just needs a story to tell. At the same time, there is a dispute over money. A white man tries to collect the debt from a respected black resident. The details are messy. Was the debt fair? Was the interest inflated? Did the black man refuse to pay or ask for reasonable terms? The core doesn't matter to those looking for an excuse. What matters is that a black man says no, that he stands on his dignity, that he acts like this land, this money, this agreement is between equals. Word spreads that he insulted the collector, that he threatened him. With every retelling, the black man gets bolder and the white listener gets angrier. This is how a spark forms in dry timber. A black man with authority over road work. A black man who will not swallow an unfair debt. These are not crimes. These are normal human conflicts. But in a world where black ownership itself is an offense, they become pretexts. Soon the talk shifts. Men gather in small groups in stores and on porches. They lean in and drop their voices, not because they fear punishment, but because they savor the feeling of sharing something dark. Have you heard? They say there is going to be trouble. They say the Negroes up in Slocum are arming. They say there is going to be an uprising. Nobody seems to have seen this supposed uprising. No one has a name, a plan, a clear event. But the rumor feels good. It makes them feel like defenders instead of aggressors. If you convince yourself the black folks are arming to attack you, then anything you do to them can be called self-defense. The rumor spreads from Anderson County into neighboring Houston County. Men with rifles and shotguns start checking their ammunition cleaning barrels and talking about riding out to see what is happening in Slocum. These are not formal militia units. They are neighbors and cousins, sometimes former lawmen, sometimes simple farmers, all wrapped in the same belief. That order must be maintained. That black economic independence is a threat to that order. By the last days of July, the talk hardens into plans. Groups decide on meeting points. They choose times. They agree on where to march and ride. Some imagine they are going to back up local officials. Some know very well they are going to kill. The night before the first shots, the air over the pine woods is thick. Crickets chirp. Families say their prayers. Somewhere off in the dark, men check their rifles by lamplight. And here is the part that matters for you to understand. There is no black uprising, no secret army, no planned attack. When honest white officials finally look into the situation, they find no evidence that black residents of Slocum had armed themselves to do anything but survive the assault that was coming. Yet the rumor is enough. The spark lands in the dry grass of resentment and fear. What happens next will make a Texas sheriff, a white man, say, "It seemed to him that men were killing Negroes as fast as they could find them." He will say they hunted them down like sheep. He will say the black people had done nothing he could discover to deserve it. Those are his words, not yours. And if even he standing inside that system could see the truth, imagine how clear it looks from where you stand today. Hold on to that thought. Because what happens when the shooting starts and what happens in the days after will show you exactly how a community gets erased in real time. It will also show you how a lie about a so-called riot becomes the cover story for murder and theft, not just in Slocum, but in city after city across the South. Before we walk into the killings themselves, though, you need to sit with one more thing. This is not ancient history. When Slocum burned, your grandparents were either alive or just a generation away. The people who pulled triggers would go on to raise families, build up farms, sit in churches, and tell their children a version of this story where they were the heroes holding back chaos. The land they grabbed would sit on family balance sheets for a century. The missing black neighbors would fade into that vague phrase they moved away. So as we step into those 2 days of blood in the pines, do not watch it like a movie about someone else. Watch it like a story about the missing branch on your own family tree. About the land that could have been in your family. About the difference between the life you know and the life that was possible before guns and rumors cut it down. Because what you are about to hear does not just explain one massacre. It helps explain why today black farmers who once held millions of acres now hold a fraction of that. It helps explain why your family might have left the country for the city and never talked about why. It helps explain why this system owes a debt it has never paid. And once you see that there is no going back, they start early. It is still July 29th, 1910. The same sun that rose over that quiet porch is now high and hot. The dust on the roads clings to sweat. Men on horses and on foot move down those dirt lanes with rifles resting easy in their arms. They walk like this is not murder. They walk like this is duty. Groups form and break apart. 8 men here, 12 there, 20 further down. Some spill over the county line into neighboring Houston County. Witnesses later say there may have been 200, even 300 white men involved over those days. They are not checking houses for suspects. They are not following warrants. They are hunting. Picture a black man walking along a road near Slocum that morning. Maybe he is headed to a neighbor's house to borrow a tool. Maybe he is taking his small crop of vegetables to sell. He hears horses behind him, moves to the side of the road so they can pass. The riders slow down instead. One raises a rifle. There are no words, no questions. A shot rings out. The man falls in the dust. They keep riding. A woman hangs clothes on a line. Her children play with sticks in the yard. The sound of hooves makes her turn. She wipes her hands on her apron, expecting a neighbor, maybe a peddler. The faces she sees are tight and strange. Guns glint in the sun. She grabs for her children's hands, but bullets are faster than a mother's reach. A boy runs from a field because he hears yelling. He sees men heading toward his family's cabin and panics. He does what instinct tells him. He bolts toward the trees, clutching a small bundle of clothes and a tin box, where his father keeps receipts and tax papers. He never makes the tree line. When people later find his body, that bundle will still be gripped in his fingers or lying thrown beside him in the weeds. Evidence that he was not running into battle. He was running for his life. All through the area, variations of this scene play out. Neighbors will later tell reporters that some black residents barely had time to grab shoes. Others grabbed nothing, sprinting into the pine woods in their nightclothes. The mobs follow them off the roads and into the underbrush. White men fan out through the trees, shouting, firing into the thickets, flushing out fleeing families the way they might chase game. You need to hear what the sheriff said, because it blows up the whole lie of a riot. William Black is the sheriff of Anderson County, a white lawman. When reporters press him about what happened in Slocum, he does not answer with careful legal phrases. He says it straight. It is apparent that men have been going about killing Negroes in that section. He says it seems to him that they have been going around killing them as fast as they could find them. He compares it to hunting sheep. That is not the language of a sheriff describing a two-sided fight. That is a man admitting he saw a slaughter. He also says something else. He says that from everything he can discover, the black people of Slocum had done no wrong. No uprising, no attack, no threat. That alone from a white official inside that system should be enough to make every so-called story about a dangerous black mob crumble. The only organized violence in Slocum is coming from the men on horseback and on foot, moving from cabin to cabin field to field road to road. As the day stretches into evening, the hunting continues. Bodies fall in the open. Some collapse near fence posts. Some lie twisted in wagon ruts. Some drop among rows of cotton, staining the soil they spent their lives tending. Others vanish under the trees. When you imagine this, do not see anonymous silhouettes. See faces. Fathers who had just finished a row of cotton. Sons sent on errands. Uncles walking to a neighbor's to help mend a roof. Brothers who had just spoken at church the Sunday before. Night does not bring safety. Fires burn in the distance where homes have been set alight. Shots crack out long after dark. Black families huddled in the woods listen to dogs bark and men shout. They pray softly not to be heard by those roaming parties, but hoping to be heard by God. Mothers hold children close hand over mouths to keep them quiet. The forest that once felt like a place for gathering firewood now feels like a thin veil between life and death. The next day, July 30th, the pattern continues. Some white men who either had not joined in yet or who want to see for themselves ride into the area. They see hidden bodies, burned houses, abandoned fields. Some join the search, others turn away. Very few, if any, step in front of the guns to say no. Silence becomes its own kind of weapon. By the time the worst is over, no one can tell you the exact number of people killed. That is not because the number is small. It is because of how the dead are treated. Bodies are left where they fall in some places. In others, they are dragged off into brush or shallow pits. Some are never recovered by family at all. People who later search the woods talk about bones found beneath leaves, about clothing caught on branches long after the gun smoke cleared. Newspapers in those first days report 8 dead, then 10, then 15. Some correspondents whisper about 20 or more. Local white officials admit privately there may be at least a couple dozen. But independent researchers and descendants who have combed through evidence know those numbers are probably a fraction of the truth. When killings stretch over fields and woods for days, when bodies are scattered over miles, and when authorities have little interest in finding them, you end up with what we have in Slocum. An official count that feels safe, an unofficial reality that is far worse. Now imagine walking those woods days later, the July heat thick around you, flies buzzing, the smell of decay everywhere, vultures circling overhead. You push aside branches and stumble on a shoe, a bit of fabric. bone. You know without anyone telling you that this was a neighbor. Maybe someone you saw in church just weeks before. You know too that there will be no careful markings, no cemetery plots, no marble stones. These people are not meant to be remembered. Even in that moment of horror, the other part of the plan is already moving forward. Because this was never just about killing, it was about clearing. Think about what happens when a community runs for its life. They leave almost everything. Houses stand empty, farm tools lean against sheds, cows stand lowing in pastures with no one to milk them. Chickens hop nervously around yards. Fields of corn and cotton sway in the wind untended. Store shelves hold canned goods and bolts of cloth. Bibles sit open on tables. Family photos lie on dressers. Trunks of clothing and boxes of letters wait in dark bedrooms for hands that will never come back. Into that silence, other footsteps arrive. Not all with guns. Some come with ledgers and a sharp eye for opportunity. White residents who did not fire a shot, or who say they did not walk those roads now and see something else. They see available land. Over the weeks and months that follow, acres once owned by black families in Slocum start to change hands, sometimes through outright occupation. A white farmer moves his fence line a little, clears a patch that used to belong to someone who fled, sometimes through tax sales. Land marked as abandoned or delinquent gets auctioned at the courthouse snapped up cheap by people who know exactly why the original owners are gone. Sometimes through paperwork games, where unclear records or missing heirs make it easy to claim there is no rightful black owner to contest a transfer. Step back for a moment and look at this from above. 200 or 300 black residents of Slocum and the surrounding area flee in terror. They leave behind thousands of acres of productive farmland, houses, stores, livestock. Within a short time, white ownership in that region increases significantly. A Texas historian writing years later notes this as if it is a neutral fact. Personal holdings of many white residents in that area increased after the massacre. Increased how? You know how. This is not some vague story about people moving in and out. This is forced displacement converting directly into wealth transfer. The bullets clear the land. The legal system and the local economy absorb it. The neighbors of those murdered and exiled become the new owners of their fields. Most of your life, if you ever heard about events like this, if you heard at all, you were probably told stories that made it sound like sudden senseless explosions of hatred, angry mobs, emotions boiling over, chaos. What you were not told is how often those explosions happened, right where black people had land wealth and political power. What you were not told is how many times that so-called chaos ended with neatly recorded deeds in new hands. What happened in Slocum is not just violence. It is also a blueprint. Hold that thought. Because we are going to come back to this idea of bullets and deeds later, when we talk about the wealth gap and what is owed. For now, stay in this place for one more moment. Feel the weight of men, women, and children, forced to leave their homes in such fear that they do not even have time to bury their dead. Understand that when they run, they are not only losing a house, they are losing the future harvest, the next 10 harvests, the next 50 years of family stability. That is what your family inherits or does not inherit. Not just dirt, but the fruit of that dirt across generations. We need to zoom in on a few more details of the aftermath, because they show you both the brutality and the paper trail of this system. In the immediate days after the massacre, surviving black residents of Slocum and the nearby areas flee in all directions. Some make it to the town of Palestine and crowd into black neighborhoods there. Others push on to cities like Tyler or Dallas, where they can disappear into larger black communities. A few scatter across state lines, swallowing their story, never wanting to risk attracting the same attention in a new place. When reporters arrive on the scene, they see abandoned houses, deserted roads, livestock wandering. They hear from the sheriff and a few white residents willing to talk. They struggle to get hard numbers. They run against the same wall. No one is counting black bodies carefully. No one is drawing up a list of displaced families. The newspapers publish different death tolls. Some papers downplay the number to single digits. Others hint at dozens. None fully capture the scale. Local white power brokers move quickly to shift the narrative. Remember that rumor about a black uprising? That is now repeated as if it justified everything. Articles talk about how white citizens had been threatened. They call the killings a necessary measure to restore order. They use the word riot. That one word flips aggressor and victim. Suddenly, in the official story, it is not white men attacking and clearing out black landowners. It is two sides fighting in a regrettable disturbance. Never mind that even the sheriff has said the black residents did nothing wrong and did not start this. So what happens to the men who pulled the triggers? A handful are arrested under pressure. A grand jury is eventually called. Witnesses testify. Stories are told. Indictments are written out against a few white suspects. For a moment, it looks like there might be some kind of legal reckoning. Do you think that reckoning ever comes? Cases get moved out of the county supposedly to ensure fairness. Time passes. Interest cools. Juries are not eager to punish men for doing what many in their community quietly approve of. One by one, the cases fall apart. Charges are dropped. No one serves meaningful time. No one is held accountable for the dozens, maybe hundreds of lives lost. The system sends a clear message. Murder of black landowners in defense of white dominance is not a crime that gets punished. At the same time, the silence deepens in another way. When local histories are written later in the 20th century, proud volumes that tell the story of Anderson County and its town Slocum is either mentioned as a place on a map or ignored completely. The massacre is left out, cleanly, deliberately. Whole chapters are devoted to the building of railroads, to the growth of churches, to the heroism of citizens in war. The year 1910 gets a paragraph about a drought or a new business opening. No mention that somewhere out among the pines that same year, a black community was shot down and scattered. Now imagine you are a white child growing up in that area in the 1950s or 60s. You go to school. You study local history. You read that nice county history book. You drive past fields near Slocum, where your uncle farms or your grandparents own land. You never hear that other families lived there first. You never hear that their blood bought your inheritance. You are told you come from hard-working people who earned what they have. That is all. You are not asked to wrestle with the cost. Imagine you are a black child from a family that fled Slocum. Maybe your grandparents refused to talk about why they left the country. Maybe they only say it was getting rough back there. Maybe you never even hear the name of the town. You just know that sometime long ago, your people had land, and then they did not. You grow up in the city, in a rented house, or a cramped apartment, and when you ask why your family never owned a place, you get vague answers about hard times and bad luck. Do you see how this works? Violence sets the stage. Law and silence do the rest. We are going to pull back even more in a moment, because Slocum is just one node in a whole web of towns and cities where the same pattern played out. But before we leave, hold one more picture in your mind. The population of Slocum and its immediate area before the massacre includes hundreds of black residents. The decades after see that black presence shrink to a fraction. The area becomes majority white. The land continues to produce wealth, just not for the people who planted the first rows. If this truth is hitting you in your chest right now, If you are thinking about your own grandparents and wondering what they never told you, stay with me. Because this next part is where we prove that Slocum is not some freak event. This is where we lay out massacre after massacre, each one with black land and black wealth at the center, each one followed by the same kind of cover story. But before we do that, pause. If you are still here and listening, that means the lies are already cracking. So do something simple but powerful. Right now, tell the world you are awake. If this truth is shaking, you go down to the comments and type the word truth. Just that word. Truth. Let yourself be counted among the people willing to know what really happened. If you are tired of sanitized history, tap that like button. Not for ego, for signal. So this story gets pushed to more people who have never once heard the word Slocum attached to anything but a place on a highway sign. If someone's face came to your mind while you listened to this, someone in your family who always struggled, someone who worked themselves into the ground and still died with nothing, share this with them or with their children. They deserve to know that poverty did not just fall from the sky, that in places like Slocum, it was created with bullets and ink on deeds. All right, take a breath. Because we are about to step out of East Texas and travel to Florida, Arkansas, North Carolina, and beyond. If you thought one town was bad, wait until you see the pattern. Let us go to Wilmington first. November 10th, 1898. Wilmington, North Carolina is the largest city in the state. It has a thriving black middle class, black professionals, black business owners, black voters. There are black elected officials sitting on the city council, black men holding office in county positions. Newspapers at the time describe Wilmington as a place where black and white people live and work beside each other in something like uneasy cooperation. Then, a group of white supremacist leaders decide they have had enough of that. They launch what they call a campaign of white supremacy. They print articles accusing black men of crimes. They spread fear. They organize. And on that November day, they carry out what historians now recognize as a coup. They overthrow a duly elected local government. They drive black officials from office at gunpoint. White mobs move into black neighborhoods, burn the building of a black-owned newspaper, and kill anywhere from 60 to more than 300 black residents, depending on which records you believe. When the smoke clears in Wilmington, it is not just bodies that are gone. Black political power in the city is gone. Black economic power is shattered. White rule is entrenched. The state government shrugs. For decades, white historians and politicians insist on calling it a riot. That word again. Riot. As if black residents somehow shared equal blame for their own murder and dispossession. Shift to Elaine, Arkansas in 1919. There, black sharecroppers, sick of being cheated out of their pay, try to organize for fair treatment. They gather in a church to discuss forming a union. Word spreads in white circles that this is dangerous, that the black farmers are arming, that they are plotting. Sounds familiar, does it not? White posses and soldiers descend on the area. Over the next days, they kill anywhere from 20 to more than 200 black people, depending on who you ask. Again, very few white perpetrators face justice. Some black survivors are even put on trial and sentenced to death, only to be freed years later after long legal battles. Slide down to Florida in 1920. In Ocoee, black residents attempt to vote in a presidential election. White citizens and organized groups are determined to stop them. On election day, tension erupts into violence. White mobs pour into black neighborhoods, burn homes and churches, and kill dozens of black residents. The exact number is still debated. What is not debated is this. After the smoke clears, there are no black residents left in Ocoee. Every black family is dead or driven out. Their land is taken over by white neighbors. For much of the 20th century, the town is effectively whites only. 3 years later, also in Florida, there is Rosewood, a small, mostly black town with black-owned businesses, black land, black professionals. A false accusation by a white woman sets off a familiar chain. Rumors, mob formation, outside men streaming in to join the hunt. Over a week of violence, white mobs burn the entire town, kill an unknown number of black residents, and scatter the survivors. The land where Rosewood once stood passes out of black hands. The town disappears from maps and textbooks. Only in the late 20th century do survivors and their descendants win some measure of official recognition and compensation. Then, of course, there is Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, often known now as Black Wall Street, a prosperous black district with more than 1,000 homes, dozens of businesses, doctors' offices, theaters, restaurants, and churches. When a young black man is accused of assaulting a white elevator operator within days, a white mob descends on Greenwood. Planes fly overhead. Fires rage. Between 100 and 300 black residents are killed. 35 city blocks are burned. More than 1,200 homes are destroyed. Insurance claims are denied. City officials rewrite zoning laws to prevent black residents from rebuilding on their own terms. Notice the pattern in every one of these places. It is not random. It is not just hatred for hatred's sake. It is targeted. In Wilmington, they destroy black political power and open up room for white rule. In Elaine, they crush a movement of black farmers, asking to be paid fairly. In Ocoee and Rosewood, they clear black voters and landowners out of regions where their very presence threatens the racial order. In Tulsa, they wipe out a concentration of black wealth that contradicted every myth about black inferiority. Ask yourself again, how many times did you hear these stories in school? How many teachers ever said to you back in 1910, there was a place in Texas where black farmers had built something strong, and their very success is why armed men came? Once you see Slocum alongside Wilmington, Elaine, Ocoee, Rosewood, and Tulsa, you start to realize this is not scattered tragedy. This is a policy without being written as such. The unwritten rule goes like this. Anytime black people build significant wealth power or land holdings, especially in concentrated areas, there will be backlash. That backlash can come through lynch mobs, through city councils, through mysterious fires, through banks refusing loans, through highways rammed through neighborhoods. The tools change, the goal does not. And here is the part that touches your present directly. Every time one of these places is burned, cleared, or redlined, the wealth that black families could have passed down evaporates. When 17 blocks in Greenwood burn in 1921, it is not just a tragedy for those living there. It is also the destruction of what could have been billions of dollars in accumulated value 100 years later. When black farmers in Slocum run off their land in 1910, it is not just a bad weekend in their story. It is the theft of everything their grandchildren and great-grandchildren might have had from that soil. We are going to connect these dots to today's numbers soon. We are going to talk about how much land black farmers owned at the height of that era versus now. We will break down how billions in wealth disappeared from black communities and reappeared in white ones. We will connect Slocum to redlining, to urban renewal, to modern land loss in the name of development. But before we step fully into the present, you need to see clearly the different layers of cover-up that make it possible for a massacre like Slocum to vanish from common knowledge for more than a century. It is not an accident that so many people, even in Texas, only heard the name Slocum in connection with this history in the last few years. That erasure itself is part of the crime. In the next stretch, we are going to strip those layers back. We will look at how evidence was physically destroyed, how the legal system helped memory fade, how schools and textbooks carefully left these events out, and how newspapers shaped the story with that one little word riot that turns murder into mutual combat and theft into defense. Stay with it. Because once those layers are exposed, the argument that all this is just sad but irrelevant history falls apart. You will see that hiding these stories is not just about protecting feelings. It is about protecting wealth. It is about keeping you from knowing what you are owed. Sections completed. Slocum Massacre. Main event. Immediate aftermath and land theft. First pattern bridge into other massacres, set up for suppression mechanisms. Cumulative word. Count. Approximately 4,700 words out of the 9,000 plus target. Remaining sections, deeper pattern exposition, with more specific numbers, detailed breakdown of cover-up mechanisms, modern wealth gap and reparations sections, empowerment and identity reframing, 2 mission-driven calls to action, including the final one, and the closing prayer and blessing, pacing check on track. The story foundation and emotional arc are established with detailed narrative for Slocum and key pattern examples. The remaining sections can comfortably expand into modern connections, systemic analysis, empowerment, and spiritual closure to reach and exceed the 9,000-word goal while maintaining engagement.